Okay, so once it streams, then we just gotta remember that we're all on camera.
Yep,
I was really talking to Russ, Bruce.
I already gave him that
Okay,
speech.
so
Thanks
once
for the
gotta,
vote of confidence, Tom. I appreciate that.
Yep,
Hi, everyone.
I was really talking to
Hello,
Russ.
how is everybody?
I already gave him that
Okay,
speech.
so
Thanks
once
for the
gotta,
vote of confidence, Tom.
Tom's the host. Yeah, we're in.
It says
No.
the meeting's being live streamed too.
John's in and Tom's in and Russ is in. It's you this time.
I got confused why Teams was up. Okay, I thought my computer flipped out on me.
You seen the flag, everybody?
No,
No.
I'm seeing Teams.
I'm seeing Teams also.
No, it's shared the wrong,
Okay, it's all good now.
Where's Rhonda?
Hold on, let me go check.
good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you.
I don't see Kevin on yet.
Do you want me to text him?
If you can, please, thank you.
Sure.
He's trying to get in. I just
Okay.
Is Andrea in?
Andrea's in.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay, I think we're all set. So I'm going to open up. We have two meetings tonight. We're going to start with our public hearing on the school safety plan. First off, I'll ask everybody to rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so every year we need to do a public hearing on our school safety plan. This is the district-wide safety plan. We have building level plans which are not made public. This plan will be up on the website by tomorrow. After 30 days, the board will then vote on adopting it. So We'll have a discussion first. It'll be presented. If anybody has any comments, they can email them to our district clerk, and she'll let us know. But any comments are strictly about the school safety plan. So I'm going to turn this meeting over to Dr. Pecora.
Right, so Mr. Costa is going to speak a bit about the safety plan.
Yes, hi. So on March 7th, the district-wide Health and Safety Committee adopted the district-wide health and safety plan for the school year of 2021. This is an ongoing plan, and it's, like a work in progress. There are always corrections made to it, adoptions made to it. The plan will be posted on the district website, where it will sit for a period of 30 days for public comment. At that point, if the board will adopt the plan, and this way then we can then post that plan in the SCD portal by October 1st, and then the district is compliant with the New York State SCD regulations.
So Mr. Costa, you'll just make sure that that gets up on the website tomorrow. Mr. Costa is the chairperson of our district-wide safety committee. So he's the lead on this project.
Absolutely, Dr. Pecora.
Russ, I know it's been in effect a number of years, and usually nothing really changes from the prior year. And anything of interest that you want to let the board know about that has changed?
So this is the first year that a pandemic plan was put in. You think someone knew what they were talking about. We have updates in the pandemic plan. Although the pandemic plan is not mandated by the state to fill out, it is recommended through Nassau BOCES, and we have updated the pandemic plan because we pretty much lived the pandemic. So we updated it with what we were doing from March 13th, the last day of school out.
So as the board knows, we work with a consultant from BOCES that's a health and safety consultant. And so through looking at the original plan and then the pandemic component of the plan, she's been instrumental in making sure that the district has all aspects of the plans covered and covered well.
Okay, so, and that plan will be posted by tomorrow, and the board earliest we'll be able to vote on it is our first meeting in September, because we have to allow 30 days for any public comments to come in. Okay, Carmen, was anything that came in? I know people haven't read it yet, so I'm expecting nothing, but we do need to.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Bruce. Can you just make sure that Andrea is let in? I think she was waiting to be let in.
Well, Tom would have to do that. He's the host because he's streaming it.
Is Andrea James P now, I guess?
Yes, she is.
All right.
Hi, Bruce.
My apologies then.
Okay, thank you, Carmen. Okay, so with that, I'm going to close the public meeting for the school safety plan, and we're going to resume our regular meeting of the Board of Education. First thing up, we have our administrative report, and that'll be followed by a presentation on our school reopening plans. We're going to have 3 plans which will be submitted to the state, and the governor will let us decide which plan or combination of plans we'll be allowed to do come, he claims, the first week of August. So with that, Dr. Pecora, once again, if you can do your administrative report and then
Sure.
Open up with the presentation.
Right. Before we begin the presentation, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. Tonight for board approval is the donation from the 9/11 committee. They've donated an Always Remember tree that is intended to be a memorial for the 5 alumni who perished on September 11th. And it is located in the center island in front of the middle school. It's a really nice tree. We thank them for the donation. And again, that is on for board approval. I should say thank you pending the approval of the Board of Education. I also wanted to just give the board an update with regards to fall athletics. It's not in our reopening plan because that's seen as a separate entity. So the New York State Public High School Athletics Association released a report last week that said that they were going to postpone the fall season until September 21st. At that point, they'll make a determination as to whether they can go forward or whether they're going to have to see if they would have to reschedule some of the fall sports to the spring. I think they have a number of different plans to how they can try to have athletics up and running at some point during the school year. Largely, that's going to be determined by the reopening of the schools. It's really going to be, to a large extent, the call of the governor and how he handles the reopening of schools. So as more is released and once the 21st approaches, I'm sure we'll have more guidance, and I'll update the Board of Education when I learn more with regards to fall athletics. So at this point in time, everything is postponed until September 21st. I also just wanted to bring to the board's attention that next week, next Thursday on August 6th, we have the graduation at Seaford High School. There are going to be 4 separate ceremonies on the lawn or the front of the building. I did want to mention a couple of things. Both the high school administration and myself, I'm sure Mr. Striffolino, Dr. Leone, Mr. Lynch, we all feel very badly about the seniors and how seniors in particular were shortchanged this year with the changes that took place in the schools due to the pandemic. And there's nothing more than we would like to have send the seniors off with all the pomp and circumstance that they deserve. I think the board knows that as a mom, I take a look at this and it pings at my heart a little bit, because I had a senior in college that graduated this year, and it was not the same. And it was a very difficult situation for the family, and you do feel it as a family. So we are poised to make this a very special event for the children. This is not something that's going to be a makeshift celebration for our seniors. We've hired a production company. There's going to be a tent that's a professional tent that's very large, because we're anticipating it's going to be very hot that day, that encompasses the whole area. We're renting chairs. They're renting a sound system. They're hiring a technician to manage the sound system. We have a videographer. We have photo services. It's going to be a really nice celebration for the students. There was some question. Oh, and I do want to mention the fact that we are aware the front of the building has more traffic, but we are closing down Siemens Neck Road, and Mr. Costa secured that. So thank you very much for your part in that. And you know, I do want to say the logical question as to why we wouldn't be having the ceremony on the turf field, which is brand new and looks spectacular. We've been told by the installation company and the manufacturer of the turf field that if there's damage done to the field, it's not covered by the warranty. And quite frankly, with all the chairs and all of the movement that would take place, we can't guarantee. We can't take the risk that something's going to get damaged and it's not covered by the warranty when we do significant damage to the field. We did look into all different aspects of that and how it could possibly be done, but it just can't. So we wanted to select a venue on our campus that we thought was pretty and memorable, and we'd make it very special for the children. So all the board members are, of course, invited. I'm sure you'll be there on August 6th to celebrate the students, and we really will make it as nice as possible. Does anybody have any questions with regards to athletics or our graduation? Okay. So with that, the lion's share of my presentation tonight is going to be the work of our task force and the presentation. So I'm going to ask Mr. Lynch to start sharing the screen, and then almost immediately you can just proceed to the second slide, which is the presenter slide, please. Okay, so I'd like to thank my colleagues for presenting the reopening of schools plan tonight. This upcoming school year obviously is going to be different than any prior year. It's posed with many challenges. And tonight presenting with me will be Mr. Striffolino, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, Curriculum Instruction and Personnel. Mr. Thomas Lynch, who's our Executive Director for STEM and Instructional Technology, Ms. Rhonda Meserole, who is our Assistant Superintendent for Business Operations, Ms. Mary Catherine Colella-Sun, who is our Director for PPS, Mr. Russ Costa, who is our Director for Facilities, and Dr. Charles Leone, who is our Executive Director for the Humanities. It goes without saying that we're in uncharted territory. So because of that, when we started talking about the reopening of school plans, the board had supported establishing a task force, which we did at the end of May of 2020. And so we established this ad hoc committee that was charged with the task of making recommendations for the development of building plans for the reopening of schools to ensure that, number one, that it was a safe learning environment for students and all employees. Secondly, that it was a meaningful and continuous instruction for all employees. And, a meaningful and continuous instruction for all students in an equitable manner. And lastly, that when we established these plans, that we could toggle, go back and forth between a remote learning environment and an in-person learning environment, depending upon what the larger pandemic environment was. I want to start off by saying that participation on this task force was no small matter. There were 36 individuals on this task force, and we divided into 6 different subcommittees. Now, keeping in mind, we divided into these subcommittees before we knew what the template for our reopening plan had to look like and the categories that were in it. So we were basing how we were going to fragment the work based upon what we thought the most important aspects of reopening the schools would be. So instructional organization deals with teaching, learning, and the schedules that will take place next year. The 2 co-chairs of that were Natalie Pedicic and John Straffolino. And then you can see the members that were on that subcommittee. Remote learning and training, the 2 subcommittee chairs, were Tom Lynch and Mr. Spinella, Mike Spinella. And then there was a whole cadre of people that signed up to work on that aspect of our reopening plan. Busing and transportation was like the tiny but mighty group. That was Margaret Servini and Rhonda Meserole were the co-chairs. And then Tom Burke and Serena Starter were members of that committee. Physical and mental health, Lorraine Burke and Mary Catherine Colella-Sun were the 2 co-chairs. And then they had members that were parents and teachers among that committee. And then facilities, Mr. Costa and Mr. Witt, Russ Costa and Kevin Witt were the co-chairs of that. And then Don Bardo, Dan Smith, and Mr. Saul Paw were on the facilities committee. The school operations, this is kind of like the unsung hero group, because later on in the presentation, you'll see aspects and the fruits of the labor of all these subcommittees directly went into the plan. The school operations basically dealt with how are you going to deal with the non-instructional aspects of school? What do you do when a visitor comes? How are you going to do arrival and dismissal? All of the nitty-gritty details that go into school operations that span across all of these areas were what this group worked on, and the 2 co-chairs of that were Scott Burson and Dr. Leone. So later on in the presentation, you're not going to see a direct correlation, but the work of this committee was steeped in like the nitty-gritty work that we really are going to need to do to open successfully. I want to thank all the members of the task force publicly. They read thousands of pages of research, literally thousands of pages of research. They read plans from other districts. They read all the guidance from the CDC. They read guidelines from New York State Education Department, the governor's office, the health department, OSHA. They were steeped in making sure that what we're recommending for the Seaford School District is based upon, 1, making sure that we're following best practices guidelines, and 2, that we've explored every avenue and taking a look at the ideas that other states, other communities have already implemented in order to fully construct something that we think is appropriate for Seaford. So once again, task force members, and they're not off the hook because we're going to continue with the task force. The interim commissioner for education, Shannon Tahoe, fully understands that the documents that we're creating right now are living documents, that depending upon the swing of the pandemic, things may need to change within our plans. So the task force is going to be in place for the school year. And we're going to go back to the task force to talk about the implementation of the plans that we're presenting tonight. Mr. Lynch, can you proceed to the next slide? Okay, so what did the task force take a look at? The big ideas were, again, to open schools safely for all students and employees, and to provide a continuous, meaningful learning experience that was equitable for all of our students. And then again, that being able to live in both worlds, have a really successful virtual experience. And we wanted to refine that because we were first out of the gate last year, and there were things that were done that we will be doing better this year. And then also be able to bring as many students back and live in the in-person world as well. So with that, we had 3 essential questions. The first one was, who are we bringing back to school? Who can we bring back safely? The second question was, how do we get them to school? Meaning bus transportation, parents driving them to school. We're really aware, and these 2 words are constantly throughout the news, social distancing, and what we felt safe, and weighing and balancing those 2 questions was a tremendous amount of the discussion that took place on the part of the task force. And lastly, what needs to be in place to seamlessly, we're going to hear this over and over again, move back and forth if we need to between a remote learning environment and an in-person learning environment. The next slide, please. So the cornerstone to the work that we did when we were actually sitting and writing the plan was taking a look at these guidance documents. I'm not going to read them to you, but you can see they're documents that are generated by the governor's office, by New York State Education Department, by the Department of Health, by OSHA, and by the CDC. Next slide. Okay, so one of the things that was very, very prevalent when we're talking about returning individuals, hundreds of individuals per building, back to a safe and secure environment, the most prevalent item that's mentioned is face coverings and the importance of face coverings. And the most recent document that came out from the CDC on July 23rd had recommended that in all circumstances, especially where there's high populations, that people wear face coverings. And I mention that because throughout the plan, you're going to see that we were requiring students and employees to wear face masks because it is seen as a protective device to keep everybody healthy. Our goal is not just to open the schools. Our goal is to open the schools and keep them open. If people start getting sick, particularly the adults, and there's nobody to teach the children, we're not going to be able to keep the schools open. So everything that we did was geared towards getting the children in, getting as many children in as possible, and keeping everybody safe, because we want, first and foremost, we want everybody to feel safe, and we want them to feel that there's thought and care to the very, very granular details of how we're going to go about making sure people stay safe. So I did want to make sure that I'm the person that's delivering the message saying face coverings are very important, and if it's a very prevalent aspect of our plan. So I think Mr. Khan alluded to this before. Actually, he said it very explicitly. The New York State Education Department is requiring that we submit 3 plans for each building. So for each of our buildings, for the harbor, for the manor, for the middle school, and for the high school, we have to submit an in-person learning plan, a hybrid learning plan, and a remote learning plan. And those all have to be submitted by this Friday. And then we're supposed to hear by August 7th as to whether the plans were rejected or not, or whether we have to go back and refine them. So this is kind of like the sneak preview slide. Mr. Striflino is going to really take this and run with this and give you a lot more detail. But this is what we're proposing for the upcoming school year. At both elementary schools, at Seaford Manor and Seaford Harbor, we're bringing all the students back K through 5. We're bringing them back all day, and they will be in their cohort, in their classroom. For the middle school, the same thing. We're bringing all the students back and we're keeping them in one classroom with their cohort. At the high school, we're going to have a hybrid model. There are too many students at the high school to safely bring everybody back. It would be a pretty reckless decision to try to bring everybody back within a regular schedule. But we are having students back every day. So the students will be in school. Mr. Striffolino will explain this in an AM PM rotation, and they will go back and forth between being in person part of the day and the other part of the day they'll be streaming remote instruction. And it's going to look very differently than it looked last year. And we're really excited about this opportunity to bring the high school students in physically every day for a part of their day. So how did we construct this? So you saw the subcommittees before, almost all of them very nicely aligned to the main categories that were in the template for New York State Education Department. So what you see before you are the main subcategories that we had to target for writing our plan. So tonight, presenting those components of our plan are the people as follows. The teaching and learning and schedules aspect, that's probably what everybody's really interested in, not that they're not interested in the other stuff, is going to be Mr. Striffolino. Remote instruction is going to be presented by Mr. Lynch. Transportation and nutrition are going to be presented by Ms. Meserol. Health and safety, as well as social emotional learning and special education, are going to be done by Mary Catherine Colella-Sun. Facilities is going to be done by Mr. Costa, and communications is going to be covered by Dr. Leone.
Adele?
Yes,
Adele?
yes,
I think normally we go through, when we do these presentations, we normally go through the whole presentation, then you'll take questions from the board.
yes.
Considering, with Zoom, there's so many different presenters, I'm going to ask if we, after each presenter, if they open it up to any questions from the board.
I think that makes sense because I think this PowerPoint is pretty long. And I think to compartmentalize it, that makes the most sense. Before I move on to Mr. Striffolino, because he's really going to elaborate on the actual plan that we have with regards to student schedules, I open the floor for questions from the board for the introduction that I had done.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Striffolino, can you please proceed?
Thank you, Dr. Bakura. Next slide, Mr. Lynch, please. As Dr. Bakura had said in her introduction, our proposed plan for the Seaford High School is a hybrid learning model. And our overriding concept with this was really wanted to have the students in the building every day. So basically our student body would be divided into two groups when we do that in an alpha way. And we're doing it in an alpha way because if other schools eventually do go to a hybrid also, it'll coordinate when family members are going to be in school. So we're looking at kids coming either AM or PM. So it's really a 4-day cycle. A1, A2, B1, and B2. So group 1, okay, would actually be in school periods 1 to 4 on day A1. They will also come to school on A2, but in the afternoon. And then you repeat that for B1 and B2. So while one group is in school, the other group will be live streaming at home. The reason why, you may ask why we have a 4-day cycle, is we have alternating days of classes, like a biolab or phys ed might alternate with health. So you really have to repeat two different days, A1 and A2, so that kids are able to get both of their equal time in terms of alternating classes. So that's how the schedule is set up. And then there's obviously travel time between period 4 and period 5. The big component we've talked about is social distancing that will occur to the extent practicable. And as Dr. Bakura said, we are asking students to wear face masks. They will also be utilizing mobile desk barriers that they will take with them from class to class. It's a plastic setup. It's very light. It's like a trifold. They set it up at their desk. Again, students not attending will be live streamed. Very important, we put a new etiquette policy through the Board of Ed. and we expect students and families to follow the etiquette policy. One of the things we heard about is that many platforms were used last year for remote learning. People will be happy to know that all the teachers at the high school will utilize one platform for live streaming, and that will be Microsoft Teams. Okay. Our proposed plan for Seaford Middle School is an in-person learning model, so the students will attend and follow a 9-period day. The students will be organized in a cohort, and they'll be assigned a classroom. They'll stay in the classroom, and the teachers will rotate to the classrooms to provide instruction. Again, we'll do our best in terms of social distancing. And again, students will utilize desk barriers. They'll be set up permanently on the desks, and we're asking them to also wear masks. The AIS schedule and related service schedule, we're still working on that. That may be the one time where students may have to leave the classroom to get their services. So the traffic in the hallways will be very minimal. But again, when walking in the hallways, obviously there'll be social distancing and kids will be wearing their face masks. So that's an in-person learning model for the middle school. Moving on to the elementary school, very similar. We're looking for an in-person learning model for this. And again, we'll follow a typical elementary school day. Students, again, will be in their room where they would normally leave to go to a special. They won't. The special area teachers will actually rotate into their classroom and provide instruction. Again, we'll use desk barriers that we put permanently on their desks, and we're asking their face masks be worn. We'll do our best for social distancing. And again, it may be necessary for kids to get AIS services and related services to leave the classroom. We're also working on that schedule too, to minimize the amount of moving from one classroom to another. If there's a situation where we need to, as Dr. McCoy said, toggle into another model, we have a plan for remote learning at the high school and the middle school. Students will follow a 9-period day. They will connect with their teachers via Microsoft Teams or Zoom. So again, the middle school will be using the same platform as the high school. All instruction will be synchronous. And when I say synchronous, I mean real-time interacting with the teacher. Again, we have an online etiquette policy that needs to be followed. And the way we're having this set up is teachers would actually come into the building and they would instruct remotely from their actual classroom. Moving on to if we need to go remote for the Manor and the Harbor School, again, students will follow an elementary school day. We have a platform selected for K2, and that would be the Seesaw platform and Zoom. Grades 3 to 5 would have Microsoft Teams platform. So again, one platform per grade level. Now, depending on the age of the students, we realize that screen time is an important thing to take into consideration. So there'll be a combination of synchronous, again, real life, live streaming with their teachers, interacting with the teachers, and asynchronous, meaning activities to be completed, not online, but done independent of the teacher. Of course, organized and directed by the teacher. So again, depending on the grade level, will be the amount of time that they will have on the computer. Again, if you're on the computer, we follow the online etiquette, and all teachers will come to school and instruct remotely from their classrooms. If we do go to a hybrid model, I've already explained the high school. The middle school have somewhat of a similar schedule in that they will again be alpha divided. Each cohort will be split in half, and they'll attend school again, either AM or PM, again, going by the 4-day cycle that I talked about. A1, A2, B1, and B2, again, so that the classes that are every other day, students will be able to go to those classes. Again,
Mr. Plato, can I just interject for 1 second? I just wanted to mention to everybody that where it says periods 1 through 4, like you could assume that that's like in person, and then 6 through 9 would be streaming. So half the day a student is going to be physically in school, then take the bus home and then stream from home, or start the day at home streaming, then take the bus and come in the afternoon. That's the group 1, group 2. So we'll add to this slide under period 1 through 4. It could say, in school or slash streaming, because I think that's what, if you're just looking at the chart, that may not be clear. Sorry.
Okay, good suggestion. Again, we have social distancing as best as we can. We will utilize the desk barriers and the face masks. Again, the students not attending will receive instruction through live stream. Again, following the etiquette policy, using Microsoft Teams, as I mentioned before. And again, if necessary while the students are attending, they may need to leave the classrooms for the AIS or related services. So while students at the high school will be changing classes, students at the middle school will not be changing classes, with the exception possibly of getting their related services or AIS services. So the cohort will remain intact. If we do go to a hybrid learning environment for the elementary school, again, we'll follow an elementary school day. Each class, again, Alpha will be divided into 2 groups, and we're going to be doing that on an A day, B day, so an alternating day basis, where half the school will be on A day, half the school will be in on a B day. Again, students will remain in their classroom, and the special area teachers will rotate into the classroom, utilizing social distancing, using those desk barriers, and wearing face masks in school. As mentioned before, we're working on the schedule for AIS and related services. They may need to go to another room for that. Students not attending will connect remotely and receive instruction through live stream. And again, with this, we are concerned about screen time. So depending on the grade level, we'll have a combination of synchronous and asynchronous instruction. And of course, we have the online etiquette when students are online. That's the hybrid for the elementary school. And the last slide I'm presenting is the in-person learning model for the high school. The students would follow a 9-period day. They would utilize their mobile desk barriers and wear face masks when traversing the hallways, and social distancing as best as we can. I've already presented the in-person models for the middle school, the Harbor, and the Manor, because those are the ones that are in our proposed plan when we open in September. And those are the proposed plans and the plans for remote, hybrid, and in-person.
Okay, I do have one question, and I'll let anybody else ask a question. Attendance, are we going to be, the teachers will be taking attendance, and we'll be,
Yes.
updating
So the platforms, Mr. Lynch has showed me that the platforms themselves have a way of taking attendance when they're live streaming, so that we're able to do it. And at the elementary school, I think the Seesaw, once you have a participation activity, which we would do, it automatically gives you a list of the kids who are online and doing the activities. So that's one of the assurances that we had to abide by, was attendance. So we'll be able to take attendance every day, whether the kid's in school or whether they're remotely involved.
Okay, and that'll be reflected on their records, right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, John.
Bruce, that's required by the New York State Education Department, that attendance be taken, whether they're streaming, whether they're doing things remotely, or whether they're in person. Attendance must be taken every day.
Okay, great. Anybody else have any questions for
I have
John?
a question.
I have a question.
I have one too. So.
All right, Andrew, you go first.
Okay, thank you. Just regarding the face masks. Now, I understand, of course, the importance of wearing the face mask. However, my concern, especially for the little ones, is wearing this mask for a long period of time. It almost being like counterproductive, touching the face more, touching the mask, not being able to focus, just having a really hard time with that in general. Maybe teachers will get creative in keeping a 6-foot distance or even greater, and letting kids take off the mask. Is that an option? Or frequent mask breaks, the shield in place of the mask. Like I said, for even adults to keep the mask on for a period of time is very, very challenging.
So we did talk about that again. I think it's a really important that we want to have the kids in school as much as we can, but we also have to have safety, right? So safety for each of the students, but also safety for the adults. So one of the things that we talked about is building in breaks for the kids in a creative way within the classroom where they can take their masks off and then put them back on again. So we did talk about that. They will have a barrier around them also on the desks. But again, we're trying to maximize safety as best as possible, also with social distancing as best as possible. So.
I understand. Like I said, that was my
understand what you're
concern
saying.
is
Yeah,
for the
especially
students.
for
And
younger
I guess
kids.
like you said, as things change and progress, maybe, that might be something that we can revisit, with, because I think that it would be very hard for the students to keep that on for a period of time. Thank you.
So Andrea, one of the things that, I started by saying is we're keeping the task force in place because we realize things may need to be tweaked along the way.
Absolutely.
So if we're being successful with keeping a healthy environment, we can always reevaluate the procedures, but we will have face mask breaks built into the day. Students will be eating in their classrooms. Again, we're trying to keep the cohort together. We're not going to be having large numbers in the cafeteria. So
Right.
obviously, when the students are eating, they're not going to be having their face masks on. And that's the purpose of the barrier. Mr. Lynch had given me an analogy, which I really appreciated, and I think it made sense. So when I'm purchasing a car, of course, I want cars with seat belts, but I also want an airbag. So the double protection, particularly for the adults, I think is important. The more we're learning about this virus, the more we know that there are some categories of people that are greater risk than other. Age tends to be one of those factors. So when we're looking at things, we're looking at the research that's in the here and now. You're on the task force, so you know the abundance of research that has been done. And we will continue to do that. As soon as the information goes out, it'll be put on, the shared drive, and all members of the task force will take a look at it. So we do not mean this to be a set in stone, reopening plan. As we need things to adjust, we will prudently adjust things. And we'll work in concert with, all of our units too. We have, well over 500 adults that work in Seaford School District, and we want to make sure that all the members of all the units are safe.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Natalie, I think you said you had something.
I know Andrea covered the younger kids, but I'm being a high school teacher, looking at the high school. Are we increasing passing time and shortening instructional time? Or are we leaving things as is?
So we talked to the high school staff about this. And my original thought was that we would increase passing time because of the way, one-way hallways and different directions. And they felt the school, the size of it, that kids would not have a problem moving from place to place. But if we have to adjust, we will. But their initial take was that they were going to keep things as close to their regular schedule as possible. If they found there was a problem, they would adjust. That was one of the considerations.
Yeah, I do want to mention, Natalie, just so everybody gets a sense for how this is going to work, at the high school with the AM, PM. So in between fourth and fifth period, there's going to be a block of time because kids have to be able to travel home and also for students to come back. Right. So there is a block of time. So to an extent, the periods are truncated on both ends because we have to allow for that passage time in the middle of the day.
True.
Okay, Kevin, I think you also said you had a question.
Yeah, it was just what Adele was just talking about with the passage time in between the end of fourth period and the start of fifth period in the high school. How long are we going to be, what's the expected turnaround time to empty the building and get the next wave of students back in?
We're estimating that's going to be like an hour and 20 minutes.
Hour and 20 minutes, okay.
No.
We have to clean too.
Right. That's
so
why
in between there, we wanted to leave enough time so that we can clean the building as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes. Will lockers be utilized?
No.
Okay, so does that mean less textbooks, less, or textbooks at home, or how does that?
Or online materials being used.
Can't really share textbooks either in the classroom, so.
But we
And
right there have them
they're
on.
only going to school for 4 or 5, 4 or 5 periods a day. So they're not carrying materials for all of their classes. They're carrying materials for the first half of the day and the second half of the day.
We didn't think using the lockers was really a safe situation.
Absolutely. Okay. So then that also, you don't have to worry about going to your locker in between periods also. So that gives you,
Right.
that frees up that time as well.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, John, thank you very much.
Okay, so the next presenter is Mr. Lynch.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So our committee, or my subcommittee, dealt with remote instruction and training. So just a quick recap: as a result of the personalized visual learning effort that we started about 3 years ago, all our teachers have been trained and have a district issued laptop. Our students in grades 6 through 12 have district issued laptops that they take home. We have laptops and carts in our we will have in our 3rd grade this year, but right now we have it in 4th and 5th. And then we have iPads available to K and 2. So compared to some of our neighboring districts, we were in very good shape in terms of technology, in terms of moving to a remote instruction environment. In addition, we secured our Smart Schools grant funding. So we're actually updating the infrastructure at all 4 buildings. The Manor's done, the middle school is nearly done, and then they'll move to the high school. And then due to other construction projects going on at the harbor will end up being last. However, our current system that we have can handle the additional bandwidth usage. However, the new infrastructure that we'll have in place by the end of the school year will clearly do it much better. The last piece is our district technicians and actually also our district computer mentors have been an integral part to everything that we did from March until the close of the school year in terms of supporting students and staff and parents, and they'll continue to do so. So as we move into this uncharted school year, they'll continue to be the kind of the glue that keeps everything moving or together and keeps us moving forward. So the devices that we have available for remote and hybrid learning, for a remote or hybrid learning model is pretty set. Throughout kindergarten and 2nd grade, we're going to be using iPads. Currently, the district has 250 iPads between the harbor and Manor, and we're in the process of securing some additional iPads, hopefully through a grant. In grades 3 through 5, we'll have laptops and carts. So if the students are in school, they'll have a laptop in their classroom. And if we have to transition to a remote learning model, they'll just simply take that laptop home with them. The plan really is that even if we have a full in-person model at the beginning of the school year, we have to be prepared for the option that we may have to go remote. So students will start off the school year using their computers. So should we have to transition to a remote model at some point, it won't be a big learning curve in terms of transitioning to that model. And then 6th through 12th grade, the students already have their district device. 6th graders will be getting them at the beginning of this school year. Mr. Caden and I are currently talking to Mr. Smith and Ms. Dunn in terms of how what's the best way of doing that, depending on how we're going to open schools. But we'll have something in place way before schools open so we can get that information out to parents. In terms of platforms, so when we moved to remote learning last year, prior to that, we had teachers using various platforms as kind of reminders and secondary devices to give out information. Then when we moved into the pandemic, we had all these platforms out that, a particular kid at the middle school could be using 3 different platforms based on 3 different teachers. So one of the things that our subcommittee really took a good look at is trying to unify what platforms are going to be used and what grades are going to use them. So in grades kindergarten through 2nd, we're going to use a platform called Seesaw, which will work phenomenally well on the iPad. Students using Seesaw don't have to have great typing skills. They don't actually have to have any typing skills. They can easily use the camera or the microphone to submit work. So if they're in a kindergarten class and they need to identify shapes of objects within their home, they can easily just use as you can see, there's an icon there for photos. They can actually, within that homework assignment from their teacher, they can actually take photos of various objects within their house to complete the assignment. They also have the ability to write, so it's as they get moving through the grades, they'll be able to trace their letters and trace their numbers. So we'll be using Seesaw with that. Then the nice thing about both platforms I'm going to show you is that they'll work on any device. So they'll work on a phone, they'll work on a PC, they'll work on a Mac. So although we'll be providing devices for in the class, any device will work with these platforms. They're not device specific. When we get to grades 3 through 12, our students will be using Microsoft Teams. The really nice thing about that is that we've been using it a lot last year. We already have Teams. It's part of our Office suite that we've purchased as being a Microsoft 365 school. Within Teams, you can video conference, you can give out assignments, you can give out notes. Students can chat with other students if they're working on assignments. You do have the ability, like we're doing right now, to do a Zoom, so you can certainly do that. Microsoft has really spent a lot of time and resources on reworking what Teams is, because Teams is originally a business platform, and now they're reshaping it so that we can use it in education. So some of the things that are going to be happening over the summer or have already happened is, as Mr. Striffolino had mentioned, the ability to take attendance. As soon as I hold a virtual meeting in Teams, as soon as a student signs in, I'll get a list when the meeting's over of everybody who was in the meeting and what time they came into the meeting and what time they left the meeting. So that will be great for attendance. In Seesaw, we'll have like a warm-up activity for students to complete, and that's how the teacher will take attendance there. But again, going back to Teams, it really has everything in there that a teacher could possibly use. And we'll have, I'll get to a slide in a little bit about how we're going to prepare teachers and parents and students for the eventuality of moving to these platforms. In terms of live streaming, as I mentioned before, Teams can do live streaming right off the bat. It's built into the platform. Seesaw does not have a built-in live streaming capability, so the districts did secure another year of Zoom licenses for all the teachers in the district. So we'll still be able to do our Zoom conferencing with students. And tomorrow and the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks, we'll be working with the technicians and various teachers within each of the buildings to kind of troubleshoot our live streaming, so that when, should we have to move to that model, we'll be able to, we'll have worked out all the kinks before that actually happens. And the last piece I want to talk about is just training and resources. So because we purchase all our technology through BOCES, we get awarded what's called Model School Days, of which I believe we have 34 for this year. So I've already set up summer training times that will start in August for teachers and teams in Seesaw. Those trainings will continue throughout the year. So it will first, the first trainings will just be setting up classrooms and setting up each of the platforms to the way that each individual teacher wants to do it. Then as we go along, we'll obviously expand and go on to the different features. Our teachers really took advantage of the BOCES training opportunities that were offered last spring. So I really envision these as being a couple refresher kind of courses. We won't be starting from step 1. We'll be starting from step 10 with some refreshers 1 through 9. So that's how we'll be working with that. Our tech mentors will be continuing offering one-on-one support to their colleagues. Again, our computer technicians are always available for hardware and software support. And then one of the things that our subcommittee really worked hard on is to create a website that makes sense, that will be easy for students and parents to navigate to get answers to questions. So if they're using Microsoft Teams and how to hand in an assignment, we'll have a web page for them to actually go to and a short little video on how to do that. So we're currently building that website. I'm working with Mr. Caden and creating the teacher side, and also Ms. McCluskey in terms of working on the teacher side. So by the beginning of the school year, we'll have a website that will be easily found on the district main page, of which we'll also have a link on each of the building pages. And then the answers, well, hopefully the answers to people's questions can be found there. For parents and students, again, that would be the website. And one of the things that we're excited about, and I'm hoping we'll get volunteers, is much like how we have a class mom or class dad at the elementary level, we're hoping to also have a tech parent for each of the classes in the elementary level, where the tech parent they don't have to be an expert in any of these things, but they have to not be computer phobic, and they have to have some computer ability. And what they could be is they could be the first stop for a parent who's frustrated, who can't figure something out, or something's not working. So, how I can't get to the Zoom, or I'm not able to log in. These tech parents could be the people who are they can answer those questions quickly. They'd be working with the classroom teacher in terms of just, what are some of the problems parents might be having. So we'll be sending out a letter soon to kind of solicit who would be interested in doing it. And then over the summer, what we'll have, sometime in August, we'll have a training session for the tech parents, just to go over if you're a K2 parent, we'll go over Seesaw. And if you're a 312 parent, we'll go over Teams. And, we'll give you the basic trainings there. So then if parents within your child's class have questions, they know that they can, hopefully get to a quick answer and an easy answer. All right, and that was the conclusion of my presentation. So I'm not sure if anybody has any questions.
Anybody have any questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I actually have one, Tom. Maybe I just wasn't following completely, but you talked about having a choice between Zoom and Teams.
Mhm.
Is that for all the grades or just certain grades?
So we have, so it will definitely have to be K2, because as I said before, Seesaw doesn't have the ability to live stream. So we'd have to use something like Zoom. So we have that feature. Within Teams, most of our teachers were using Zoom once we procured the licenses. So one of the trainings or some of the trainings that we'll be doing over the summer is showing teachers how to use Teams, as because if you can do everything in one spot, that's the way to do it. However, we wanted to keep Zoom available for teachers just as a backup if there's something else they want to work on with their kids. So we will have it available, but even if they use Zoom to do their live streaming, that they still use Teams as the platform to deliver all their instruction. So the Zoom we use really for what we're doing kind of right now.
Okay, because I think one of the biggest complaints I've heard was, all these different platforms. So it was good to hear that we're going to be establishing, like one platform, K through 2. But I just don't want to hear that, kids are in the middle school or high school, one class they're on Zoom, next class they got to jump to Teams and jump back to Zoom, then jump to Teams. It's just going to be very, tough.
Right. No, I agree. And to do the live streaming, in terms of in our troubleshooting the live streaming, Teams was a much easier way to live stream, believe it or not, within our environment. So that's certainly what I'm going to be training the teachers on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom.
Are there any other questions for Tom? Okay, so next presenting transportation and nutrition is Ms. Meserole.
Hi, good evening. The object of here is social distancing on buses to the extent possible, with the top priority on the health and safety of both our students and drivers. So how this will be accomplished will be students and drivers will both be wearing masks. The social distancing went back and forth in the last 2 months with regard to buses. The issue is there are not enough drivers and not enough buses. We will do the best we can with the buses being routed at a maximum of 44 students on buses. The guidance also specifies that siblings should sit together from the same family, which will assist with that. In addition to socially distancing on buses, it is also required that students socially distance at the bus stops. So while they're waiting for the bus, they will be 6 feet apart. We're also requiring that parents or an emergency contact be there at the bus stop until or students K-5 until the buses take off with the students. And we will enforce the wearing of masks, which is very important due to the number on the buses through the cameras. Each bus is installed with a camera, and we will use those to monitor the wearing of masks. And I suppose if students refuse to, those cameras will be used as a means of enforcing that and perhaps disciplinary. So the next slide speaks of self-health assessments. And the bus drivers will be self-assessed. And then once they get to their depot to leave for the day, they will also be have their temperatures taken by our educational bus transportation staff before they get on the buses. Our students will also need to self-health assess at home prior to boarding the bus for school. And this self-assessment is grade specific. It's different for both the elementary and then the secondary grades. MC will later, Mary Catherine will speak later more in depth about the self-health assessments. So the next slide shows us that disinfecting and hand sanitizing is very important. Our bus vendor, Educational Bus Transportation, has assured us that the buses will be disinfected daily, both after the AM runs and then the PM runs. And the chemicals that they're using are green products. So they've made that assurance to us. Unfortunately, hand sanitizer is not allowed on the buses due to the combustible composition of that. So, you know, students will make sure they wash their hands before they get on the bus and then again when they arrive at school. Transportation for the non-public, parochial, and private schools, including students receiving special transportation as indicated on an individual education program, placing a child out of district will be provided. So those students will still receive their transportation as needed. Were there any questions with regard to the transportation? Many routes were run and we've looked at our different models. So that is all in place. Keeping an eye both on the social distancing, but also not to erode the school day.
I know, Rhonda, I know we sent down a survey. Was there a big response of parents willing to drive their own students to the school, if you have that off the top of your head?
Yes, there were 2 surveys sent, and there is a big majority that would drive their students. It was interesting that the elementary students would most likely be driven in the morning, but it changed for the afternoon. So I guess once the parents or guardians are at work, they would then you know, require the transportation home. So yeah, my child will utilize district bus transportation, and to school it was, you know, there was 800. It was pretty much half and half to school and then home from school overall. So it was telling, and I guess, you know, the bus passes will be distributed to all students, and we will look for more of a commitment once you know, we get closer to the start of school.
Okay, that was one of my questions. So they're not going to be held to what was answered on that survey right now. There's something else that will be
Yes.
going forward.
Yes, I think we need to establish exactly what the intent is of the parents, whether they're comfortable or not comfortable. We're doing the best we can to make sure that the children are safe. But as Rhonda said, there just are not enough buses and there are not enough drivers. So I think it's going to largely depend upon, you know, what the families are able to do. There was definitely a drop off in the afternoon with parents that were able to transport their children. At the high school, I'm imagining it'll be a little bit more challenging as well, because you really have, you know, a varying schedule to begin with. Either you're going to be going in the morning and then picked up midday, or you're going to be going in midday and then being picked up later in the day. So to the extent that the community can help us and parents can transport their kids, we'd greatly appreciate it, because it all goes down to, you know, again, going back to the wearing of the face masks and trying to keep everybody safe. We not only want to open, but we want to keep our schools open. And if people start getting sick, we're not going to be able to keep our schools open. So to the extent that parents can assist and can drive their children, what we can say is that we greatly appreciate that, because then that will decrease the loads on the buses. But everybody that's entitled to be on a bus, they're entitled to be on a bus. And of course that will be provided.
Okay, thank you. And then just one more question. Are you going to assign any seats on any buses at any grade levels, or no?
We're talking about that. So that work that I said was done by the Unsung Hero group, the operational group. Some of the nitty gritty details have to be, if we know that siblings are going to be on the same bus, obviously we want them sitting together. We're also, something as basic as you load the buses from the back to the front, so that if you're sitting in the front, you don't have people like passing by you all the time, you know, exchanging potential germs. The buses themselves, we're going to have windows open until it hurts a certain degree. That's guidance from the New York State Education Department. So all those very finite details, now that we have the basis of our plans, that's still the work that the task force is going to do, to drill down and come up with some of those solutions and specific protocols.
Great, thank you.
Rhonda, you still on for nutrition?
Yes. So our vendor is Aramark, our service, and they will students will have access daily to both breakfast and lunch, and whether they are in attendance or at home. And the majority of those meals will be the grab and go type. When students are eating in their classrooms, not cafeterias, those meals will be delivered to the classroom on carts. And when they are, for the secondary level, going in and out in that extended period of the day, will be a grab and go coming in and going out for those students. The important thing is there will be monthly menus, and there will be no exchange of money during the day. Those meals will be ordered online. Similarly to the Microsoft Forms, there is an app that, you know, is expensive, but they want those meals ordered in advance. So by the Friday before the week, those orders will be placed based upon the menus that are issued. And they mostly will be cold lunches. But for those students that will be able to grab a meal at the secondary level and take it home with them, they will be able to be consumed at a later time and may entail a hot lunch as well. So something that the student would go home and microwave in, at home and heat up. The next slide is.
Okay, so before we move on, I just wanted to point out two things. At the secondary level, at the middle school, students are going to be eating their lunches in class, just like the elementary school. At the high school, we're still working out exactly when the students are going to eat. There may be the option of grab and go in that period in between 4th and 5th, if that's what they want. They are going to have study areas built into their day, so there may be the opportunity to eat in some of the classrooms. What we're trying to mitigate or lessen is the amount of times there are a lot of germs hanging around a building. So we're not going to tell students that they can't eat in school at the high school, but if we can provide opportunities for students to be able to eat at home, you know, quite frankly, we're just dealing with trying to contain the amount of germs that would be spread more easily when people are eating than not eating.
I have a question, Dr. Pecora.
Yes.
Before we move on to the next slide, unless I missed it, since we're on the topic of lunch, recess. Will there be recess or even like a rotating schedule so kids can go outside and?
There are going to be periods where
demand.
students will be going outside. That's still, yeah, I keep going back to that operational committee. Those details of face mask breaks, you know, breaks with regards to exercise, breaks with regards to going outside. It is our full intent to make sure that children get outside every day, you know, weather permitting. We just need to figure out how we're going to do that, maintain social distancing, and keeping students within their cohort. All the research shows that you really need to keep your students in their cohort. So it's not going to be recessed by grade level. Again, everything's aimed at, for what we know about the virus, for what we know about how you create a healthy environment. We're trying to put those protocols in place to open schools and keep them open. Okay, so are there any more questions for Rhonda with regards to transportation or with regards to nutrition? Okay, so one of the heavy lifters of the task force work and just of the document that we have to submit with regards to assurances is health and safety. So I want to thank Mary Catherine and Lorraine Burke. Lorraine Burke really is like baptism by fire right now as being our lead nurse. And she's just done a fantastic job of jumping in really and doing a tremendous job so far. So we thank Lorraine, one, for being our lead nurse, and then two, for approaching the task force with such vigor. So Mary Catherine's going to be the spokesperson. And again, Mary Catherine's just done a tremendous job on this committee, and I'm going to turn it over to Mary Catherine.
Thank you, Dr. Pecora, and I just want to thank the rest of the subcommittee for all their hard work. A lot of late night meetings, so this couldn't have been put together without their assistance. In terms of health and safety, we know that the biggest priority to keeping our students and our staff and the community as a whole safe is looking at ways to mitigate risk. With that being said, our New York State guidance for the reopening of school in conjunction with the CDC guidelines and the Department of Health guidelines give us a very specific blueprint by which to follow to support those mitigating strategies within our schools. So the main areas in which we'll be doing that are conducting mandatory health screenings for our students, staff, and all essential visitors, instituting plans to maximize social distancing where practicable. We know that that will shift depending on the setting and depending on the situation. So it's anytime it's absolutely possible, it will be instituted and enforced. Practicing the use of appropriate face coverings and personal protective equipment throughout the day, as well as managing protocols to isolate ill individuals, whether that is a staff member or a student that should fall ill during the school day. In addition, the instruction and the training of students and staff, as well as families and the community in general, in proper health and hygiene practices to assist us in mitigating risk. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of the health screenings for our students, it's broken up into two different types. And the first I'll talk about is grades K through 8. So students in grades K through 8 will submit a paper health screening ticket that will require a daily temperature check to be taken at home, and they'll have to submit that ticket prior to entering the building, whether they're being dropped off, walking, or taking the bus. Students that come to school that do not present a ticket will receive a health screening by school staff health personnel. So they'll receive a temperature check as well as a health assessment from our school nurses and or other health personnel. Any student with a temperature of 100 or higher is going to be sent to an area where they can be isolated from others, supervised, of course, and then a call will go home to the parent and or guardian. The child will need to go home, and we'll help advise them on how to reach out to a healthcare provider and or next steps. Students not feeling well should not report to school. And in turn, the family should contact the school nurse to notify them and help receive any additional resources or guidance from our school nurse about next steps. Next slide, please. So this is an example and the actual, health screening ticket that will be used for grades K through 8. And the questions are basically an attestment to the fact that your child does not present with symptoms, the child does not present with a fever, and the child has not had a high risk of exposure. So the parent would sign the ticket would be brought to school, and the ticket is an assurance that the child has actually met the criteria for entering school for the day. Students in grades 9 through 12 will also be responsible for having a daily temperature check. However, they will be completing an electronic health questionnaire prior to coming to school every day. Students who have not completed the electronic questionnaire will go through the same process as our students K through 8. They will come to school, school health personnel will provide them with a temperature check as well as health assessment screening. Any student that has a temperature of 100 or higher will not be sent to their classrooms. They will be isolated from others and or supervised, and a call will go home to the parents or the guardians for them to come pick the child up. Again, any student that does not feel well should not report to school. Families can reach out to the school nurse and we'll assist them with next steps in terms of information and guidance. Health screenings are also mandated for our staff members. So staff will complete the online health screening as well, which incorporates a daily temperature check. The completion of the online assessment indicates that they do not present with COVID-related symptoms, they do not have a temperature of 100 or greater, and their risk or exposure to those that present with COVID-related symptoms and or COVID positive testing is not there. Staff members, as the students, if they do not feel well, they should not be reporting to school. They should contact their building administrators and the school nurse. Designated personnel in each building will review the completed health assessment. So that will be monitored. And just so everyone knows, of course, the strictest levels of confidentiality and privacy will be maintained and upheld. No medical records are kept by the school district. So what is kept? There's no documentation of the read for the temperature scan. That is not kept. It's whether you are have cleared the assessment or not cleared the assessment. Health screenings are also going to be provided to and required for all essential visitors to the buildings. Visitation in general is going to be strictly limited across the district. All approved essential visitors, that includes parents, vendors, contractors, are subject to our temperature check and must complete an electronic health screening as well. The visitors must meet both requirements to enter the building. In terms of what the electronic health screening looks like, I know this is small, but I'm going to walk you through it. So outside of every building will be a QR code, and you'll see that in the left bottom corner there. Individuals coming to the building will be expected to scan that. You do it right through your cell phone with the photo portion of your device. It will open up the website version of the questionnaire. The questionnaire will ask for some very basic information, your name. It'll ask you a number of questions that indicate that you have not demonstrated COVID-related symptoms, you have not been exposed to any potential risk, and you do not have a temperature of 100 or greater. At that point, the outcome of the information put into the app, put into this online questionnaire, is that you will then receive one of two responses. You'll receive what you see here on the right-hand side, that purple square box. It has the date, it has the name of the individual, and underneath it, it says employee is approved to enter the building, approved to enter the location, okay? That means the individual has cleared the health survey and is able to enter the building. The alternative to that is if an individual answers yes to one of the questions on the health survey, what will happen is they'll receive an indicator that is red. It'll have the date, it'll have the name, and it'll say that the employee or individual has not been approved to enter the location. So it's really, not only does it say it in words, but there's also the color connection of the red indicator. Again, the individual has to clear both the temperature screen as well as the online submission of the health clearance in order to gain access into the building. So we talked a lot about social distancing throughout the presentation, and this is really one of the aside from face coverings, one of the biggest mitigating factors to keeping everybody safe. So social distancing will not only be enforced and practiced in all buildings, but also on district grounds to the greatest extent practicable. That means classrooms, that means at our entrances and exits, that means all movement within the building and during outdoor activities, like Dr. Pecora had mentioned earlier. Face coverings and personal protective equipment. So all students and staff, as well as any approved essential visitor entering the building, is required to wear a face covering that's appropriate. There are some exceptions to that, and the exceptions would be if it impairs the physical or mental health or well-being of an individual or demonstrates a significant challenge or obstruction to learning. At which point developmental mask breaks will be given throughout the school day, and those will be based on grade, age, and be incorporated into the school day, grades K through 12. There will be a number of methods for which to instruct and train staff, students, and parents regarding the proper use of face coverings, putting it on, taking it off, discarding, the idea of, how to, when you're taking a mask break, removing it so that you're not touching the front of the mask. So there'll be a tremendous amount of instruction and training that goes into that, and it'll take place in a variety of formats. Face coverings will be made available to staff. We've purchased 3 cloth face coverings for every staff member, as well as made available to students and or essential visitors who do not have their face covering for the day, have forgotten it, or let's say it gets soiled or falls on the floor during the day. There will be available face coverings for students and staff and visitors if need be. So another area that we need to prepare for is the management and isolation of individuals who become ill throughout the day. So all students and staff that exhibit symptoms of COVID-19 or present with a temperature of 100 or greater, we know should not report to work. Students or staff that do become ill during the school day, they felt fine when they got there, and throughout the day, they just started to not feel well, will be assessed by our health staff. They will be isolated, but they will be assessed by our health staff and then sent home to follow up with the healthcare provider. Both students and staff are going to then follow the return to school protocol based on the current Department of Health information, as well as the Center for Disease Control guidelines. There are separate directions for those with suspected COVID, those with confirmed COVID. And so the details of that, for how long an individual stays out of school and at what point they return to school with what documentation is outlined in the plan as well. So when we talk about the training and information, in order for individuals, students, staff, as well as our families in the community, to be able to practice these sound measures for mitigating risk, it requires training. So Staff, students, and parents will get the training we mentioned before through a variety of means, identifying COVID-related symptoms, not only COVID-related symptoms in general, but also COVID-related symptoms that are specific to multi-inflammatory system disease for youngsters. Health and hand hygiene practices, the appropriate way to wash your hands, when to wash your hands, when, if you don't have access to water and soap, how to use sanitizer and when to use sanitizer. The appropriate use of face coverings and other personal protective equipment, whether that be face shields and or gloves for our staff who may be working more directly with some students. How to complete the health screenings, how to conduct a temperature check on yourself and or your child. Training on the mental health, wellness, and social emotional learning aspects that we know are going to be so critical in this time as we return back to school, as well as what is social distancing, when do we social distancing, what does that look like, and how can we make sure that we practice it and expect it of those that we are exchanging with and involving ourselves with.
Okay, so before we go on to your next segment, Mary Catherine, perhaps if the board has any questions regarding the health screenings and the health protocols that we have in place.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, Mary Catherine, I actually have one.
Sure.
I don't know if it came up in your committee or, it's something that we talked about in the future. Has there been any discussion about making students or even staff clean their hands once they enter the building?
So there's been discussion about that in the plan. There's also an outline that's listed developmental in nature, of course, for youngsters K-5, 6 through 8, and then 9 through 12 about the appropriate times in which to wash hands. Anytime you're entering a place, anytime you're exiting a place, prior to eating, after eating, once you've coughed or sneezed, the CDC outlines a specific time frame for when you should wash your hands, and that is incorporated in our training and our resources, and that is something that is outlined in the plan.
Bruce, I just want to augment what Mary Catherine had said. We have hand sanitizer in every classroom, so that's available in addition to the washing of hands. So I meant to mention this prior when we were talking about there's no hand sanitizer. So the buses are not allowed to have hand sanitizer dispensers on the buses. However, when they get to school, upon entrance, there are hand sanitizers. There's also going to be hand sanitizers in every classroom. But hand sanitizers do not take the place of washing hands also. So we're going to be doing both.
Right. Well, it's mainly for the younger kids who may not still develop those habits. The parents not in school, that hopefully the teacher will be prodding them to wash their hands. You're absolutely right. It's the soap and water is actually better than sanitizer.
The elementary principals have, looked at putting plans in place to assist teachers in making sure that these protocols are embedded throughout the school day. So it almost becomes routinized for our students and our staff as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so now we're going to move into the social and emotional learning piece of this, as well as the special education requirements as we look to return to school. The mental health and social emotional wellness piece is truly pivotal, especially at this particular point in time. I think each one of us, not to mention our students, our staff, and our families in which we serve, have suffered some form of trauma through all of this pandemic. And that continues, and it needs to be addressed in a number of ways. And, we have tiered interventions in place as a district currently, which we will enhance and build upon to move forward to address this very important piece of this puzzle in returning to school. So we have a comprehensive school guidance, school counseling plan, which will be updated to reflect the unique needs of the COVID-19 pandemic and how that affects our students. We will be looking to make sure that that comprehensive plan also has some very specific, while we have tiered supports embedded in that, some very specific language to address those tiered supports and what students those will be used to address the needs of. We're looking to develop a new district-wide team, which would be a very comprehensive district-wide representative team, including parents, to address the mental health needs and social emotional learning capacity within the district. In terms of our resources and referrals, we have a number of things in place. The one thing that we do have and we have been building upon is a comprehensive resource guide of local community resources for our families based on the area that they need the support in. It has information for trauma, it has information for anxiety, it has information for counseling, group counseling, individual counseling. It has information about substance abuse, suicide prevention. There are a tremendous number of resources. It has references from medical doctors, medical professionals in all different areas. It's broken down by area, so it's an easy to use resource for our family and communities. And that is something that will be made available not only on our website in an electronic file, but as well as paper copies for those who request it via paper. We are a member of the Nassau County, Nassau BOCES Mental Health Consortium. And the Mental Health Consortium is something that was started last year. We were members last year. It was extremely pivotal and important for our mental health and PPS staff providers to be able to receive some of that training, to be able to bring those strategies and techniques into our building to support the youngsters here. The Mental Health Consortium has increased the number of professional development opportunities for our staff. We look forward to sending our team, and we look forward to developing and implementing those initiatives across the district as a whole. This year, we are so pleased to be able to have entered into a partnership with Northwell South Oaks. This particular partnership provides us with an additional layer of mental health support, which many school districts cannot alone provide. It includes psychiatric evaluations and consultation for students. It includes social worker case management to oversee care, as well as connections to community resources for students and their families. It also allows time for professional development opportunities for staff and families on a variety of topics. So we are really pleased and grateful to have the opportunity to partner with them this year. And we feel that they'll be really instrumental in supporting us in building some relationships with outside providers, as well as supporting our youngsters who are in need of that level of care. In addition to our mental health and social emotional learning opportunities as it stands, we've included some professional development training opportunities to include trauma-informed needs for our students, additional risk assessment training, looking at fear and anxiety, especially as it relates to COVID-19 and the related stressors there, returning to school being one of the main ones, and just wellness and mindfulness in general. Any questions about the mental health, social emotional learning piece of the presentation?
Yes, maybe I missed it. You know, of course, as we all are very concerned about the students' mental health, social well-being, especially coming back to a place that we want them to love, and we want them to want to come to school in the middle of all this, and the lack of normalcy is so concerning. Will there be access on the district website, resources for parents? Maybe I missed that in your presentation. I was writing notes that parents can access, and you know, the social worker and the school psychologist will hopefully be as much hands-on as you can, helping the classroom teachers in supporting these students and the emotional needs that they may really be suffering with their emotions.
Absolutely. So we currently have on the main page of our website a mental health tab on the right-hand side, where we have all of our updated mental health resources, and that's been updated throughout this entire time. Every building has a pupil personnel or a PPS website on their page that also links some of these same resources. Our mental health staff will be going into classrooms the first several weeks of school to do an assessment. It's really
great. That was my next question. Thank you.
Screening on every child. I mean, we really want to get a baseline for where our youngsters are and the impact that this has had not only on them, but on their families. And so that will be something that will be conducted by our mental health and PPS support staff so that we can assess that data and then look to see what level of tiered support those youngsters need individually.
Great, thank you. That sounds great.
And I just want to also mention that when we met with the principals, obviously it'll be impressed upon all the teachers that when the kids come back, they're going to need some time to get used to this new surrounding and this new setup. That as much as we will be teaching academics, we need to spend some time transitioning them to their new environment.
Any other questions regarding mental health and social emotional wellness?
I think we're good, Mary.
Okay, so then we'll segue into special education. Next slide, please. Thank you. So special education is, of course, we know regulated by New York State Part 200 regulations, as well as there's federal law and regulation. We are responsible for providing our students with disabilities a free and appropriate public education. That is something that does not stop because of the pandemic, and that is something that we are committed to providing our students as we reopen in September. So students with disabilities, regardless of the program model we're in, whether that's in-person, remote, or hybrid, will receive FAPE consistent with, of course, the health and safety protocols implemented to maintain their safety in the building. And services will be delivered in accordance with the student's individualized education program where practicable. The state still allows some flexibility with that. So as we need to shift our learning models, that may shift slightly with it. However, every effort will be made to incorporate youngster services in alliance and accordance with their individualized education plans. Documentation for the provision of special education services is something that will continue to take place. It took place the minute we closed in March, and it will continue when we reopen. Staff will document the provision of those special education services as well as parent communication, and that's something that will be submitted weekly. Our outside providers that we contract with who service youngsters outside of staff will submit monthly session notes, and that will be maintained in our records as well. Student parent engagement and communication will be ongoing with staff and families regarding progress and progress monitoring as far as our students with disabilities in the Committee on Special Education, as well as our preschool youngsters in the Committee on Preschool Special Education. Any communication as it aligns with regulations and due process procedures will be provided to families and students that are old enough in the preferred language and mode of communication that is most beneficial to them. Our collaboration with both our CSE and our CPSE will take place in alignment with the New York State regulations outlined for initial meetings, reevaluation meetings, requested review meetings, program reviews. So that will continue as it has since the closure, as well as access to any accommodations and/or modifications that youngsters will need. Of course, we'll follow what is on the individualized education plan. However, also taking a look at, as we shift and move between these different programs, any assistive technology that may need to be required for the unique needs of the learners that we support. So any questions about special education specifically?
I don't have anything. Any other board members? Okay, Mary Catherine, I thank you very much.
Okay, so Mr. Costa is next to present facilities, and there have been some questions that have been coming in from the public. So at the end, we can answer some of those questions.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Russ Costa. I'm the Director of Facilities for the school district. Before we even start, I'd like to thank my subcommittee for the countless meetings and hours and going over plans from different states before our reopening plan from New York State was actually available, just trying to get ideas of what other states and what other plans are out there, just to get on that page of thinking before our plan came out. So Tom, can you go to the first slide? Thank you very much. So the district has been and will continue to purchase PPE equipment for our student, staff, and healthcare professionals. We will also make sure we have adequate stock as needed to go through the school year. And we're looking at an availability through numerous vendors to try and keep the supply chain coming. Each building staff and facilities members, facility staff, has been trained to clean and disinfect in all areas of the building under the strict CDC guidelines and using EPA approved disinfectants. And as mandated in our assurance template, we still have to do all of our mandatory drills, which include our bus drills, our fire drills, our lockdown drills, and so forth. And we will be doing that under the direction, under the guidance of our Nassau BOCES Health and Safety, who will help guide us through, these drills in these difficult times. So as Dr. Pecora had said, each classroom will be outfitted with an alcohol-based hand sanitizer, which by law and code has to be used under adult supervision. EPA registered disinfectants and the use of bleach will be used to disinfect all of our bathrooms, classrooms, office areas, common areas, all of our high touch areas that's laid out by the CDC with their recommendations of the high touch areas like light switches during the day, handrails in the staircases, bathroom fixtures during the day, making sure that, the day crew is walking around and taking care of all of those areas where the night crew would be more in the classrooms and doing the disinfecting that needs to be done in the evening while there's no staff and students in the classrooms.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. McCraw, I'm sorry.
No. I just wanted to ask, it seemed like maybe the board had some questions.
Sure, of course.
Are there any questions for Mr. Costa with regards to the cleaning? The CDC is very explicit with regards to the protocols that need to be taken for cleaning, and then how the products even are used by our custodians and our cleaners. Mr. Costa is going to be making sure that he uses that as a checklist with all of the individuals responsible for maintaining the buildings.
Okay,
So,
Russ, let me ask you this. I know at the high school, that'll be the model where the students are in half a day. It may be that way at the middle school under some models. Will each classroom be cleaned between the morning students and the PM students?
We've purchased equipment that will help streamline the cleaning process. So yes, we will be in the classrooms in between the AM and PM session, disinfecting the student desks in between, when they leave and when the new session comes in. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good to hear.
I have a question. I just believe this falls under your umbrella, but direct me if I'm wrong. I know there was discussion of tents. Again, just trying to provide a little normalcy, get students out of their desk outside, maybe doing classes out there or some kind of instruction. Is that still a possibility, Russ? The tents?
Can I take this one? I'm gonna take this
Absolutely.
one and take Mr. Costa off the hot seat. So we've been inquiring about that. The protocols and the hoops that you have to jump through to establish the ability to purchase the tent. It's not the tent itself that's expensive. First of all, you have to go through the Office of Facilities Planning, and you have to go through a regular process for basically expanding your footprint of the school district. And there are a couple of hoops that you have to jump through for that. The installation and getting everything to code is outrageously expensive. So we just need to weigh and balance the benefits, because by the time you get through the process of getting approved for the tent to be put up, are we talking that it would be like mid-October, November by the time we jump through all the hoops? And every tent approximately, we're still trying to hone in on the cost. So the tent may only cost $10,000, but everything that you have to do with regards to electrical, with regards to securing it, with regards to getting permits. It drives the cost of the tent, believe it or not, up to about between $130,000 and $150,000 per tent. So we're looking at, we're not saying we're not doing it, but we're looking at weighing and balancing what the benefits are, because once it gets to a certain degree, we're not allowed to have the children outside. And then we're worried about, and we need to better understand what happens if there's severe inclement weather in the winter months with regards to snow and snow removal and the safety of these devices should you have heavy winds. So it's something that we're going to investigate more. It is not a dropped item, but it's not as easy as it would appear to be. I told them to go out and buy 4, but it's not, I did, but it's not as easy as it appears to be.
Yes. As Dr. Pecora said, New York State Education Department facilities planning, in our reopening guides and in our assurances that we have to meet, lay out specifically of what has to be done to be able to put a tent in with ventilation, electric, flooring, 2 means of egress, and as Dr. Pecora said, the time frame would be a long time to be able to get it, and I'm sick of shocked every day. I've been doing this job for a long time, and I'm sick of shocked every day at how much this costs. And when I opened up the email from our architect, I almost fell on the floor. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Ross. Thank you, Dr. Pecora.
Any more questions on facilities before? Last category is communications, and then I just have a couple of slides at the end, so we're going to just get everybody, we're in the home stretch, everybody. Okay, so next up is Dr. Leone.
So good morning, good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon. Feels like the morning, doesn't it? The all of this that just came before this obviously is not going to really mean much unless we can communicate it. So we're going to have to communicate this throughout the year, both before school starts, after school commences, and throughout the year. So you're going to have building communication, district communication. So how will that happen? So as has happened in the past, district and school communication will continue to be disseminated, especially the essential information, through our Shout Point app, which all of you receive and receives as well. Very often that'll refer you to an email if there's a longer document that you really need to look at or download. So that will continue to happen both prior to opening and throughout school. So look for those. Additional important information will certainly always be on the websites, the district website, the school websites, the secondary school, and possibly some of the other administrators. We're thinking of sending some video links for some specific activities that will be upcoming or very important items that you'll need to know. And social media has been used at the high school already and may continue to be used. For students and visitors and adults in the buildings, the communication is really going to be through the meetings, but also signage posted throughout the building. Certainly visitors and parents or essential visitors, because as we said, we're going to limit as many visitors as we can, will need to use signage. And that really will tell you where to walk, how to walk, what staircase to use, where to report in. And then there's the signage, CDC signage that Mary Catherine referenced earlier, where you're really reminding the students and the staff and everybody the proper protocol to keep yourself safe. In terms of the reopening plan and other critical information throughout the year, as we are doing here, there'll be Board of Education meetings, we'll be addressing it, PTA meetings certainly, faculty meetings, superintendent conference day meetings at the beginning of the year will be essential, and of course, student orientations. Next slide.
Okay, so Dr. Leone, sorry, I was leapfrogging you.
What?
No, you have one more slide.
Yeah. So the reopening plan information is accessible both to the visually and hearing impaired as well on our website through Immersive Reader. Some of you may know that already, but that will be accessible for that population. And then certainly for our English language learners and households. We also will be sending things home, as we always do, in their language, and we'll be able to do that as consistently as possible. Also for meetings and other purposes, we have translators and interpreters that we can access through BOCES as we have done in the past. And we also access our teachers as well. And access to the school buildings for visitors, which we mentioned already, and vendors, like tent vendors and things like that, will have to visit the school. We'll be able to, they have a QR code also at the front of every entrance. If they don't go, if they can go on the website, they can get the information of what they have to do prior to coming to the building, because they have to do a screening as well, and assent to the fact that they don't have a fever, et cetera, et cetera. But if they don't, before they enter the building, there's a QR code, which they can do that there before they enter the building. And
Okay, so are there any questions for Dr. Leone with regards to communication? Okay, so I just want to mention before we get to the last slide that this PowerPoint will be up on our website tomorrow. And then the plans that are going to be submitted to the state on the 31st, although they're still pending NYSED approval, we will put them up on our website by 5 o'clock on the 31st. So there's two ways that the community can get information. Either they can read it from the PowerPoint, or if they want more granular information, some of that granular information is in the plans, and there are 4 plans, one for each building. So with that, I thought it would be prudent to say all of these safety precautions that we're putting in place and getting ready to reopen schools, it doesn't come without a cost, and the costs have been fairly significant. So I just wanted to present publicly just some of, this is not a comprehensive list, but some of the things that we've been purchasing in order to open and open safely. So cleaning materials, Mr. Costa was referring to before about disinfectants that we're using that allows us to clean large areas fairly effectively, or effectively, I should say. And so we've purchased the foggers that spray disinfectants across large areas. They're considered to be very effective. So we've purchased those. Hand sanitizers and dispensers, masks, desk shields, face shields, disposable gowns, gloves, non-touch thermometers, because we need a significant number of those to do the temperature checks, particularly if students are not coming in with their screening materials. Signage, both on the floor and on the walls and throughout the buildings. One of the things that I'm not sure that we touched upon was drinking water. One of the things that I need to attest to as the superintendent of schools is that the children and the staff have access to drinking water. Water fountains aren't necessarily the most sanitary way to achieve that goal. So we have had water filling stations that we've been solely putting into the buildings, water filtration systems. We're replacing a lot more of them. How many more, Mr. Costa? 10 more, 12 more?
15 more.
15 more throughout the district, because we want to make sure that students have a safe way and faculty and staff have a safe way to get water. And so we're installing those. Again, that wasn't necessarily anticipated, but we feel it's much needed. Transportation costs have skyrocketed significantly. Our transportation committee, as the board knows, from last year to this year, the increase in cost was 37%. We're hiring more permanent substitute teachers so that we have a constant flow of support, again, so that there are adults to teach the children. And in this environment, we want to make sure that we're prepared. We added an additional half of a nurse to our faculty, to our staff. And in addition to all of this, there are a tremendous amount of assurances that we have to have. Mary Catherine did a wonderful job talking about all the COVID training materials, but we need to make sure that the training materials are accessible to students, parents, and then faculty and staff. So we're purchasing the training materials. Some are at no cost, some are with a cost. Social emotional learning programs. We had planned and budgeted for our affiliation with Northwell. We are adding an additional classroom teacher to 6th grade this year. That is for 1 year only. to decrease the class size. We're also increased the purchase of iPads and laptops. So if we are in a situation where we have to go back to remote, we're trying to create an environment where almost every child will be able to have their own device and families may not need to share devices. We're hoping to get into that environment with our recent purchases. And lastly, the food delivery materials are going to have to be purchased. So because we're going to be delivering food to classrooms, we have to purchase insulated bags, we have to purchase carts, we have to purchase these bigger mobile carts that contain larger amounts of food that can then go to the smaller carts. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is just some of the things that I think touch on all the areas. And we're moving and we're moving quickly. And I do have to thank everybody that's been working this summer, the staff in the business office and people that have been really working tirelessly to try to keep up, Mr. Costa's facilities department, trying to keep up with everything that we're going to need in order to start the year safely. I do want to not forget to mention that we have a huge thank you to the building principals and assistant principals. They came in today to meet with the central office administrative team so that we can fine tune the individual building plans that will be going up to the state. And over the next several months, or the next month, really, the last week of July and going into August, there's going to be a lot of heavy lifting that's going to have to be done with the small details that we had spoken about before, the procedural aspects of opening safely. And I thank them in advance for their diligence in attacking that tremendous task. So at this point, are there any more questions from the board?
Wait, I don't have, okay, let's take board questions first. Any questions from the board?
I'm good.
So just one real quick. I know this is a lot, but I know that there are a lot more specifics, and parents rightfully are going to want to ask those questions. If they feel the need to ask these questions immediately, do they go to the building principals first? Do they where do parents go for this information?
I would always start with the building principals if it's building specific information. And then after the building principals, depending upon what the function is, if it's regarding curriculum and instruction, it should go to Mr. Straffolino. If it's regarding nutrition or busing, it should go to Ms. Meserole. If it's regarding health and safety or special education, it should go to Ms. Colella-Sun. And then ultimately, I'm the keeper of all questions, so they can come to me too. But you know, if it's one of those categories, if it's regarding disinfectants and cleaning, it should go to Mr. Costa. So basically, if we take a look at the presenters and they have a question about something within that category, that would be the person to reach out to. And if they don't know, anybody can always ask me.
Dr. Pecora?
Yes.
I would just mention parent or anybody who's interested, they might want to first go to the website to take a look at the plans, the individual plans for their building, because they may find their answer right there.
That's a really wonderful point, Dr. Leone. And as I said, those plans will be up on the district website. They'll look very similar because we use a template and then we try to amend it to be building specific, but they'll be up by 5 o'clock on Friday. We do have some questions from the community, Mr. Khan. So, you know, you tell me when you'd like to, for me to address some of these. I'll try to address as many as possible.
Well, I'm not sure if we're talking about the same questions. Our district clerk was good enough to forward 2 questions that came into the board email, which is our normal route for questions. The first one is they're asking about students with food allergies, that their child has a peanut allergy. So how will that be handled if they're eating in the classroom?
So I'm going to let Mary Catherine answer this one. But before I do that, within the context of the streaming, there's a chat place so people can ask questions. So we probably have more like 15 or 20 questions. Some of them are categorized together. So it may be efficient to try to answer some of those if we can.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm usually that chat, I don't know what happened. We don't monitor that, but I mean, if you feel there's some questions, obviously, you know, feel free to answer them. So why don't we do the 2 that came into the board first? And then
Mary
you can.
Catherine?
So students who have allergies, our health professionals, our school nurses, and our district nurse coordinators are aware of that. We ask that all parents submit updated information regarding the allergy, so we know whether it's a contact allergy, an airborne allergy. In terms of provisions within the classroom, we have been instructed based on the food delivery service, as well as some of the guidelines from the Department of Health and Resources, that providing it's not an airborne allergy, with social distancing and the use of the barriers, there is an increased protection that is there. However, your child's personal health care provider would be best in, now that you know that information, kind of assessing the situation and or determining whether those options would assist in meeting the needs of your child. If for some reason your child's allergy is more substantial and significant, that would require a separate location to eat, that will be provided for those youngsters who cannot remain within the classroom to have a safe environment to eat lunch related to their allergies.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a question relating to masks. I thought this was more or less answered, but I'll just, if you can go over it again. I don't know which one of you would take this, but the question is, I understand that masks will be required to be worn all day. How will you handle wearing masks in those classrooms with no air conditioning?
Okay, so do you want to do it, Mary Catherine?
Sure, I'll take that question. So yes, face masks, approved face coverings are required and will be expected to be enforced throughout the school day within the buildings and on the grounds. We have discussed the appropriate developmental level of each grade, as well as the type of mask breaks that would be required for those grades. So students will have an opportunity, as well as staff, not only to incorporate those mask breaks into the school day. However, anytime a mask break is needed and or requested, that is something that can be provided. In terms of ventilation, so the CDC recommends that ventilation is a top priority for air quality in relation to the fact that the virus is spread through droplets and or aerosolization of droplets. That being said, we will leave windows and doors open. Ventilation systems that are window ventilation systems, such as air conditioning units and or ventilation systems that are not central air conditioned, will be determined as far as the location in which those units are in, and the soundness and safety of the use of those systems. So it would depend on the location. However, there's ample opportunity for appropriate mask breaks throughout the school day, as well as any time it's requested or needed.
I just have a quick question, if I may, because I was actually thinking the same thing of how oppressively hot the classroom can be for students and teachers, and to have the mask on. When we talk mask breaks, how long are we talking? What is a mask break?
So the developmental mask breaks would be, taking into account the age and ability of the child at the time. So what a mask break looks like on the kindergarten level might be different from the mask break that could be embedded in a very organic way in the middle school or the high school level. Most certainly at the change of classes, most certainly anytime you're in between a period, most certainly for 2 or 3 minutes at a time as you break up a period. So there are plenty of opportunities for those type of mask breaks. And again, for youngsters who are younger and this is new to them, and we're helping them to desensitize to some of these protocols and processes. And our families have done a tremendous job in working on that with their youngsters. We have an in-person summer program. So the families we know at home are working very hard with their youngsters, but it could be multiple times over the course of an allotted period of time. Certainly children, when the barriers are up, they will have an opportunity to have their face mask. Anytime we have an opportunity for youngsters to go outside for a mask break, to breathe in fresh air, to, go outside and socially distance when the weather is not inclement, is something we look forward to doing. And it really is dependent, while some of those details are still being worked out, it's really dependent on the age appropriateness of the child and the developmental level.
I think,
Okay, thank you, Mary Beth.
I think also not to state the obvious, but we're going into an environment that we've never done before. You know, we're making the plan as best as we can based on the information that we've had. And there are things that are going to have to be adjusted and monitored and tweaked along the way. But the idea is, an important thing is the safety for everyone, for the kids and for the adults. And one of the main things that we've seen to come to realize is the wearing of the mask is important. But obviously, when you have little kids, you're going to need to adjust it as best as you can. And, you know, time will tell.
Okay, so I'm going to try to, I'm not sure I'm going to get all of the questions. I'm going to try to eyeball them and lump them together as best I can with regards to what people are asking. People are asking about the average class size. So the class sizes at the elementary level range between 17 and typically 22. There is one grade level at the Manor and one grade level at the Harbor that they have about 23 students and at one point 24 students in a class. The 6 feet apart, for the most part, depending upon the class, where you can actually achieve 6 feet apart, is typically 21 seats. So, and sometimes 20, and it depends upon the size of the classroom. Some are 19, I believe, right, Mr. Straffolino, at the elementary schools? I mean, and the classes at the Manor, some of them are a little bit bigger than some of the classes at the Harbor. So the reason why we're putting so many protective elements to a classroom setting is to make sure, and we sound like a broken record, that everybody's protected. So we'll have the desk shields, we'll have the students wearing a face covering. It doesn't necessarily, face covering can be a bandana, face covering can be something that makes sure that the nose and the mouth are covered. And the materials that Mary Catherine was talking about before, the health materials and the trainings that we're going to provide for students and parents will talk about face coverings that are appropriate and those that aren't appropriate. But there's no perfect science to this. We can map out the rooms, but the rooms are very tight. If a student sits back in their seat, if we want to allow for some leeway, that we're not only allowing for social distancing, because social distancing alone is not going to give us the coverage and the protection that we need. So as I said before, there's the seatbelt and there's the airbag, and we're making sure that everybody's safe. If there is the opportunity to become more lenient on some of our protocols, we will of course do so. And we're keeping that task force in place to take a look at the myriad of issues that can occur at the beginning, middle, and end of the school year. We're going to adjust accordingly. And at the middle school, the average class sizes are around 18 to 21, 22. So again, we're within a range. And at the high school, it's really hard to predict because some of the class sizes, the average class sizes at the high school are somewhere in the 20s as well, but it really does depend upon the course. Some of our courses are, to begin with, there are only maybe 14, 15 students. Like an example would be like an AP physics class. There's typically, less than 20 students in that class. Some of our other classes are more populated. So it's a little more difficult to predict at the high school. One of the reasons why we're with the hybrid schedule is because some of the classrooms at the high school are very small. And if you are to socially distance, you can really only get 8 students in there safely. So we want to make sure, and the research shows the older the child, the greater the risk of developing some respiratory issues. So we really want to take everybody's health and safety into consideration. And again, including the faculty and the staff. One of the other questions was about cleaning. I think we answered those questions about disinfecting in between. We're using a combination of products, green-friendly products, but also the CDC as well as the New York Health Department allow us to use very specific concentrations of bleach. Mr. Costa and his crew are very specific about making sure they comply to the guidelines, but the fact remains that bleach is one of the most effective disinfectants. So We are using that in part, and we are using it in full compliance with the regulations. There was a question about what recess will look like. We're still looking at that. I think we mentioned that before, that some of these details we're still working out. Question about whether students are going to remain in the same classroom at the middle school. Yes, at the middle school, students are going to be placed by cohort. There's a tremendous amount of research that says that that if you are able to sit students by cohort, that's one of the main distinguishing factors as to whether we had full in-person instruction for the middle school or we just did it for the 6th grade and the 7th and 8th graders were on the hybrid schedule. Taking a look at our ability to, for the most part, keep students by cohort, we decided to go for a full in-person instruction. Students will, however, may not be by cohort with regards to world language. And then I think it was mentioned before, any of the support services, students are going to have to leave the room for that. And let me see. There was a question as to whether there was consideration to have the 9th graders attending every day. We're having all students attend every day, but it's just a matter of whether it's the AM or the PM. We thought that it was very important for all students to feel connected to the school, and we did not isolate out one grade for the high school plan. There was a question about how BOCES is being implemented. So every school district in BOCES is considered a school district, the certain programs. So every district is required to establish a plan. So they'll develop their return to school plan, and then our high school will coordinate with the BOCES programs, and we'll implement that to the extent that we are able to. And at that point in time, that's something that we're working through. If you give me a minute, I just have to go to another screen to see if there are additional questions. Okay, so there's a question, what happens if a student or a staff member is exposed to COVID and is there a protocol? Ms. Galalsan has done more research than I think she even wants to admit to on COVID and health and safety. She's the queen of health and safety. So this is something that the nitty gritty details we're working on. It is one of the most important aspects of opening our schools, and we'll make sure that we'll do it safely. But I just want to pass this along to you, Mary Catherine, because you're much more erudite on this than I am.
So yes, so it starts with anyone who's in the building. If anyone who's in the building is suspected or demonstrating COVID-related symptoms or develops a fever, immediately they're isolated and sent home. The same goes for the staff. At which point, once they, depending on how they're feeling, if they can seek out their own healthcare provider for medical attention and or directions, they would do that. They would then continue to stay home. At that point, they would go for testing. That testing is either going to come back as a positive or negative. There is a tremendous wait time for the results of those tests. However, the CDC current recommendation is that it's 10 days from the testing. At which point then it's 3 days that you do not have a fever without fever reducing medication and or symptoms. So the protocol will outline specifically for individuals who have a positive test for COVID and individuals who were treated, not tested, but yet treated and or suspected of COVID. If there gets a point where it leaves an individual situation and moves to a more of a multiple individuals, or there is additional contact that took place, then we would go into our protocols for contact tracing communication with the Department of Health. We have district level COVID coordinators, building level COVID coordinators in our plan, and as well as Ms. Lorraine Burke, our district nurse coordinator, will serve as our COVID resource officer. So there are tremendous layers within the plan for addressing any potential COVID-related cases.
You know, and that being said, I think Mary Catherine mentioned this, you know, our relationship with the Department of Health is really important. You know, when we had some cases back in March, they were helping the extent that they could. In this pandemic, as we said before, it's uncharted territory. Everybody's working to the best that they can, but everybody's dealing with information that they have at any given moment in time. And what I mean by that is the guidelines that we had gotten from the CDC last week on Thursday, the 23rd, were a lot more friendly to being able to open schools. But again, one thing that's been said over and over and over again, and we're not doing it to confine any individuals, is that face coverings are important. So we took the guidance from the CDC to heart, as well as the work that we've done on the committees. And our original plan was to have the 7th and 8th graders be in a hybrid model. But we thought it was much more important to get all the kids back to school to the extent that we can, but we need to do it safely. So that's why they're by cohort. That's why there are some of the restrictions in there, because we're going to have a lot of students. 550 plus students in a building is a lot of students. And we want to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe. So we're going with the research, the protocols, the practices that will yield us the safest environment. And then I think, as Ms. Parisi said, if we can loosen up a little bit, we will, but we're going to do everything prudently and based on research. We are not doctors. We rely on doctors. We try to call doctors, but we are not doctors. This is out of our element. We're trying, you're asking, Mr. Straffolino says this all the time, we're a school and we're having to make medical decisions. And we're very uncomfortable with that. He says that all the time. We are not doctors, we are not nurses, but we're really, although Mary Catherine, I think you can probably take a couple of tests right now and pass some of the tests because of all that you've been studying. But, you know, in seriousness, we're just trying to do the best we can to keep everybody safe, and we're asking for everybody's patience because it is really, everything that we're putting forth is put forth with the intent of getting kids in school and keeping kids in school. It doesn't help us if we get them in and then we have to send them home. So I tried to answer, you know, all of the questions. There was, I think, one other question about, we're still working through, the question was whether there's going to be staggered arrival or dismissal times. We're still working through that with the building principals. I think to a large extent, it's going to be determined by how many walkers we have. If there are more people sending their children to school and driving them themselves or walking them themselves, I think that gives us the ability to stagger the arrivals more. We don't necessarily have leeway with busing because we have a set number of buses, we have a set number of routes, and we're not going to have the flexibility of staggering the bus routes. Parents can, I think this is important for parents to know, basically the schedule that you had with the bus, with the exception of the high school, is going to be very similar to the bus stop and the bus routes and the bus times that you've had in the past at this moment in time. Obviously, the high school is going to be different with that midway point. There was a question, and I thought we answered it before, but it wasn't in the presentation. The time in between 4th period and 5th period at the high school is going to be somewhere between like an hour and 10 and an hour and 20 minutes. It's going to be a significant amount of time. So students are going to have the ability to get to school, you know, safely. And then also those that are going home, they're not going to be doing a mad rush to try to get to their computers so that they can be present for their streamed classes. We're trying to create the least amount of stress as possible on the part of the students.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pecora. I'd like to thank all the presenters tonight and also like to thank all the people that spent a lot of time in all our committees and subcommittees. And I know a lot of them will be on this committee and subcommittees in the future also, because like it was said numerous times, This is a fluid situation. It changes by the day, changes by the week. What we presented tonight, what was presented to us tonight may change a lot by the first day of school in September based on what happens in August, what we hear from the governor, and how the virus either ebbs and, dies down in New York, keeps dying down in New York, or if we have a spike that some people are predicting. Okay, we do have our regular agenda. So unless anybody on the board has any other last minute questions, I'm going to start our agenda. Okay. We have our personnel action. I need a motion for agenda item 3.1, 3.2.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Need a motion for agenda item 4.1 and 2.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We have 4 contracts. Can we do them together?
Yep.
For me.
Okay, need a motion for agenda item 5A1, 2, 3, and 4.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Need a motion for agenda item 5B1.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Need a motion for agenda item 5C1. This is the second reading of our remote learning policy.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Actually, Mary Ann, you still with us?
Yes, I am.
This afternoon, your firm sent down some guidance. Is everything in the policy we're adopting in the guidance that was released today? Do you know?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We're up to the donation. Need a motion for agenda item 5D1.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay. Need a motion for agenda item 5E1 and 2.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'm going to take closing comments. I'm just going to go around the screen in no particular order. Dr. Pecora?
No, I just want to thank the board for their support. Thank the task force members one more time and the building administration. Thank them for the work they did today and all the work that they're going to have to do over the next month. And I just want to say to any senior class parents or seniors that may be listening tonight that we're really going to make your graduation as special as we possibly can. And I'm very much looking forward to attending.
Mr. Striffolino?
I just wanted to thank the task force also. It was a lot of time, a lot of work, and the building administrators and central administrators. We put a lot of time into this. As Dr. Pecora said, I keep saying we're being asked to put a medical model into an educational institution, and we're doing it the best we can to educate our kids and make sure that everybody is safe. And to have all the answers, to have everything planned out when you've never done this before, it's a little difficult, but we're going to get there.
Thank you, John. Stacy?
I just want to thank everybody. This is, every time you turn around, I feel like there's something new. You ask one question and you just form 15 more questions. So I just want to thank everybody for all their hard work. My mind is blown. I'm sure your minds have been blown working on all of this. So thank you for all of your hard work. It's going to be interesting, but with a positive attitude, I think it'll be good.
Thank you, Stacy. Natalie?
No, again, I just want to thank everybody. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of time, a lot of hard work, and it's not easy. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, Andrea?
Just wanted to say, Mr. Lynch, it was a pleasure working with you. We were on the remote learning committee together, lots of meetings and readings, discussions, and it was just a pleasure. And just like Stacy, trying to stay positive as an educator and a mother with 2 small children and a board member, just keeping positive that we will get through this and things will continue to get better in the world. And I would like to thank the administration for the presentation.
Thank you. Kevin?
You know, going to piggyback off what everybody's already said so far. Thank you to the task force for all the hard work they put in over the last 2 months working on this. I can imagine how stressful it is, especially with things changing every other day with guidance and what's coming down from the state and the federal government. And also thank you to the 9/11 committee for their donation. They do a lot of good work here in the community, so I just wanted to thank them for that as well.
Okay. Rhonda?
Yeah, you hear uncharted territory every day, and I'm just so grateful to be able to have worked on the task force and continue to work with a really great bunch of professionals, very hardworking, conscientious, and Margaret Servini, she's on a well-deserved vacation now, but with regard to transportation, I can't tell you how many times she's rerun routes, and so I'm very appreciative for all of the work that she's done as a part of my subcommittee on transportation. So it's been a great experience, I guess, as you know, as far as it could be for this time. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lynch, anything?
I just want to say I'm just working with the members on my subcommittee, working with the members on the task force and my fellow administrators. It's been a lot of work. It's been very rewarding. It's been very frustrating. I'd like to just communicate to the parents, you know, we're thinking of everything you could possibly think of, and then the next day we have to think of brand new things. So, but in the end, as Dr. Pecora said, we want to bring everybody back, but we want to bring everybody back for good. We wanted to bring them back when they're safe. And so it's just going to be a lot more work down the road.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Mary Catherine?
So I just want to thank the board for your support through the process, as well as the subcommittee. I couldn't have presented today without their support and the hours that they put in. I also just want the students and the parents and the community to know that great care and effort was put into this plan to make sure that we put your children at the top priority, and the staff that work with your children at the forefront of our decisions, and that we're doing the best we can to make sure that you feel comfortable and safe in sending your children back to school.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, anything?
You're muted, Charlie.
We can't hear you.
Thanks. It really, I'd like to just echo what everyone just said. It really is something that is at the forefront of what we did, is keeping the children and the staff safe, to really get us back as best we can to really educating and having a supportive kind of environment for the community. But above all, for me, was and will continue to be, the incredible work that my subcommittee did. I didn't get to mention them earlier. That was really, and the entire task force, and the opportunity to work as an administrative, kind of like a community teaching administrative team collaboration, was somewhat unique, and it will continue to be unique. But it's a valuable experience, and all for the students and for the staff. So thanks for the opportunity.
Okay. Just to the public, we're going to be going into exec session. This is going to be our second exec session of the night. After exec session, we will not be coming back into public to vote on anything. We will be ending our meeting. So this time I need a motion to enter into exec session for the purpose of discussing contract negotiations with the nurses and employee contracts with the aid, security, and UTS units.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Good night, everyone.
Right.
Okay.